Welcome to this special edition of In the Lighthouse, your safe harbor from the storm, with your host, the Lighthouse Keeper, Daphne Collins, bringing you Heroes of the Old Testament.
Hello, and welcome to this special edition of In the Lighthouse, your safe harbor from the storm. I'm Daphne Collins, the Lighthouse Keeper, welcoming you back for another epic tale of Heroes of the Old Testament. Did you ever ask yourself this question? How did I get here? Some of us make definitive plans on how and what we will accomplish in life. We make assumptions about how we will make it happen. When problems arise, we try to mitigate them with the contingencies we set in place just in case. Worldview will likely shape how we navigate the plans we make. If we choose to view things from a biblical worldview, we do so by recalling God's command to Moses. Consecrate yourselves, therefore, and be holy, for I am holy. The truth is, being holy and trying to carry out our plans don't necessarily go hand in hand. The world rejects our determined adherence to holiness if it conflicts with its agenda. Throughout biblical history, men and women have been lauded for qualities that exemplify their pursuit of righteousness, such as courage, integrity, wisdom, justice, and leadership. These classic virtues are demonstrated by their conscious choice to do what is moral and right in their encounters with others. According to the philosopher Aristotle, being virtuous is about achieving personal excellence and living in harmony with reason. In their engagement with others, the virtuous person can be relied upon to act with decency, treat others with respect, and uphold their principles even when it's difficult. Three principal characters portrayed in this narrative embody what it is to be virtuous. This episode, entitled Ruth, a Virtuous Woman, is a story about a woman from a pagan culture whom God chose as an ancestor of Jesus Christ. The author presents the reader with an important theme affecting the characters' outcomes. Their names serve as labels that predict or demonstrate their fate, which ironically fall within God's plan of redemption. Although not specifically cited in the Bible, a Jewish Talmudic tradition contends that, in addition to the Book of Judges, the Book of Ruth was authored by the prophet Samuel, Israel's last judge before they appointed a king to rule over the nation. Written sometime between 1030 and 1010 BC, the story was intended as both a cautionary tale and a continuation of the scrolls of Moses and Joshua. Samuel's purpose was to present a thematic and chronological account of that tumultuous period in Israel's history. Following the death of Joshua, it traces the lineage directly to King David, who eventually brought stability amid the chaos plaguing the land. The story is a beautiful depiction of God's covenantal faithfulness and provision of His people, Israel, despite their unfaithfulness and rebellion towards Him. In keeping with Jewish tradition, the Book of Ruth is read aloud on the second day of Shavuot, also known as the Feast of First Fruits, Harvest, or the Feast of Weeks, which commemorates the end of the barley harvest and the start of the wheat harvest. It is during this season of the year that certain historic events take place that shape God's salvific plan for humanity. The Hebrew word Shavuot, meaning weeks, refers to a total of 7, beginning on the second day of Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, for a total of 50 days, culminating on the day of Pentecost, which in Greek means 50. Unlike other feasts that begin on a specific day of the Hebrew calendar, Shavuot is calculated as being 50 days to the day after the 7th Sabbath. So, what is the significance of God's faithfulness, these feast days, and the Book of Ruth? Well, for Jews, these feasts represent the fulfillment of the covenantal promises God made to Israel in the wilderness. We begin by looking in the book of Exodus to understand why Shavuot is celebrated. In Exodus 20, God made a covenant with the Israelites at Mount Sinai. Through Moses, God gave his people the Torah to guide them in how they were to live. Furthermore, he told Moses to instruct Israel to commemorate 3 specific feast days as holy unto the Lord: the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Weeks, and the Festival of Booths. This was so that the generations to come would always remember who it was that brought them out of bondage from Egypt and provided for their every need in the wilderness. Well, did Israel remember God in his mighty works after the death of their great leader Joshua? Recall, if you will, that before the death of Moses, and even before Joshua became his successor, the Lord God issued decrees for how the people were to worship and observe his ordinances when they entered the land that was promised to them. Moses declared to the people, "You shall not do according to all that we are doing here today, everyone doing whatever is right in his own eyes. For you have not as yet come to rest and to the inheritance that the Lord your God is giving you." Moses died. Joshua died. Samuel's sobering report on the condition of Israel at the end of the book of Judges provided the backdrop to the opening of the Book of Ruth. He summed it up in 2 sentences. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Here we go again. Who will stop history from repeating itself? Okay, let's get started. What's in the name? According to Jewish tradition, the act of bestowing a name holds great significance in the life and destiny of the bearer. Names were frequently used to call forth God's purposes over a child's life, serving as a summary of what God planned for them. Naming was a demonstration of authority, often performed by the mother or father to establish the child's identity within the family and covenant. Sometimes parents chose names to record important facts about the child's birth, including their emotional, spiritual, or relational progress. It's also possible that the selection of a child's name could be looked upon as a minor prophecy, as parents believe they are directed spiritually to a name that matches their child's innate soul. Samuel, the author, pointed to the significance of the name as a label for understanding God's purpose in the fulfillment of his covenantal promises to Abram, whom he renamed Abraham. The Book of Ruth opens during the time when the judges ruled and there was famine in Judah, telling of the catastrophic events taking place for a farmer and his wife who made the decision to relocate their family to Moab to escape the famine. He was doing what he thought was right in his eyes. This man, Elimelech, whose name means God is my king, came from Bethlehem, which ironically means house of bread. His wife, Naomi, whose name means pleasant or delight, supported his decision, and so did their two sons, Mahlon, whose name means sickly or weakness, and Chilion, whose name means wasting away or pining. As head of the family, Elimelech's decision would greatly impact their lives. Sadly, for a man whose name means God is my king, Elimelech's actions did not conform to the words of the prophet Jeremiah. Blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord, whose trust is the Lord. He is like a tree planted by water that sends out its roots by the stream and does not fear when heat comes, for its leaves remain green, and is not anxious in the year of drought, for it does not cease to bear fruit. Given the significance of the naming tradition of the Hebrew people, it is surprisingly shocking to learn that these parents would bestow on their boys names that were destined for a coming doom or death. Why would a parent do that? And how did their neighbors in Bethlehem react to their unusual name selections? Did anyone comment? What do you think they said when they heard that Elimelech and Naomi had moved their family to Moab because of the famine in Judah? As to all this, Samuel doesn't say. The narrative simply states, they went into the country of Moab and remained there, but Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her two sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other, Ruth. They lived there about 10 years, and both Mahlon and Chilion died, so that the woman was left without her two sons and her husband. The story highlights the consequences of a lack of trust in the provisions of God. When trouble comes, what is your first reaction? Do you look to God for wisdom first, or do you lean on your own understanding and do it your way? Elimelech ignored the particulars about trusting the Lord in seasons of drought. Leviticus 26, verses 3 and 4 says, "If you walk in my statutes and observe my commandments and do them, then I will give you your rains in their season, and the land shall yield its increase, and the trees in the field shall yield their fruit." Elimelech's decision to move his family to Moab and remain there proved devastating for Naomi, whose heart was broken and embittered by the pain of loss. Finally, she'd heard news of the bountiful harvests happening in Judah and remembered Elimelech's land in Bethlehem and wondered what the farm looked like after all these years away from Judah. A widow's weeds. 3 widowed women were left with no visible means to care for their needs. Naomi looked through eyes of grief at the 2 young women standing before her. She loved her daughters-in-law and only wanted the best for them. They'd been married to her sons during the 10 years that Naomi lived in Moab. Now that her husband and sons were gone, she was resolved to return to her home in Judah. She encouraged Orpah and Ruth to return to their parents since they were still young and perhaps their parents could find them new husbands. And to lessen the potential for them to feel guilt or regret for separating from her, the older woman encouraged them with a blessing, another theme throughout the Book of Ruth. Naomi said to them, "Go, return each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you, in the house of her husband." Once again, the meaning of their names gives you a clue about their faithfulness to an unknown God versus a return to a pagan God they can see. Orpah's name means back of the neck, and Ruth's name means compassionate friend. A small test of faith was extended to the young Moabite women. A choice was offered. Both women wept over Naomi's entreaty that they return to their old lives in Moab and serve the God of their parents. Orpah, who had been married to Chilion, kissed Naomi and did as she was instructed. She left their company and returned to Moab and their god Chemosh. Ruth, who was married to Mahlon, and ever the loyal and compassionate friend, clung to Naomi and tearfully declared, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you." Both women made their choice. Naomi, seeing that Ruth was determined to go with her, did not offer any further argument as they prepared for their journey to Bethlehem in Judah. Bitter waters. Naomi and Ruth arrived in Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest and saw that the town was alive with activity. Naturally, the new arrivals drew attention and were met by the women of the town, who recognized Naomi, whom they hadn't seen for years. One of the older women spoke up and greeted them. "Is this Naomi?" Naomi turned and answered, "Do not call me Naomi. Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me." The name Mara means bitter or bitterness and is used to represent profound grief, sorrow, and deep personal misfortune. She knew the women would understand her meaning and further lamented, "I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me?" The term bitter water can be expressed metaphorically to describe a life of sorrow and turmoil resulting from disobedience to God. Naomi was referring to the decision made by Elimelech, whose name means God is my king, over a decade earlier, who fled Bethlehem, the house of bread, because of the famine in the land, and lived in a country and among a people they were prohibited from, Moab. Nevertheless, Elimelech moved his wife and sons to Moab and married them to Moabite women, thereby bringing judgment to their house. His folly became Naomi's cross to bear, widowhood, the loss of her sons, and impoverishment as the fruit of her loss. She knew that the law was clear concerning the Moabites and the Ammonites in the assembly of the Lord because of these nations' treatment of Israel when they crossed the Jordan River to lay claim to the land promised by God. When Ruth and Naomi finally arrived on the property that was abandoned years earlier to escape famine, Naomi's sorrow shone all over her face. This is judgment for not trusting and obeying the Lord, she thought, as she and Ruth looked on at the decrepit house and overgrown shrubbery hiding its entrance. Jeremiah provides insight into this. Why is the land ruined and laid waste like a wilderness, so that no one passes through? Because they have forsaken my law that I set before them, and have not obeyed my voice, or walked in accord with it, but have stubbornly followed their own hearts. Therefore, thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, Behold, I will feed this people with bitter food, and give them poisonous water to drink. Ruth slipped her hand through Naomi's arm and leaned into her. God will provide, you'll see, she said gently to the older woman. Naomi turned to look at the weary and dust-smudged face of her daughter-in-law and gave her a brave smile. Yes, she said, nodding in agreement. I believe that God will provide. Naomi was correct. God will and does provide. In fact, He established provision for the care of widows and the poor in the law of Moses. To establish justice and ensure dignity in work, the law provided for the poor through mandatory agricultural gleaning, requiring the gathering of fallen produce at the harvest edges for those in need. Farmers were forbidden to harvest all the way to the very corners of their fields or gather every grape off their vines. They were to leave the leftovers for the poor, widows, orphans, and foreigners. Leviticus 19, verses 9 and 10 instructs the landowner, When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to its edge, neither shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and for the sojourner. I am the Lord your God. This provision of the law was clearly understood by Naomi, who was not surprised when Ruth asked if she could glean behind the reapers of the barley harvest in the field of a man named Boaz, a close relative of Elimelech, whose name means strength and swiftness. Naomi, remembering this relative, agreed with Ruth's proposition to glean in his field. She recalled that there was yet another provision of the law that could be employed, which could secure Ruth's future and possibly ensure Mahlon's inheritance: the levirate marriage law. She encouraged Ruth to seek only to work in Boaz's field over any other. Another interesting theme employed in this short narrative is coincidence. The purpose is to point out the obvious to the reader, to observe that the main character just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Furthermore, this is to demonstrate God's hand and to highlight the overall theme of the story: redemption. Let's take a moment for this short break. When we return, we will continue with Ruth, a Virtuous Woman.
Hi, this is Cherise Collins with an encouraging message. Today, let's delve into the profound concept of God's love. It's not just one of his many attributes, it's the very essence of his being. It's as significant as his holiness, his righteousness, justice, omnipresence, and omniscience. In fact, it's even the basis of his righteous vengeance and his wrath. This unique aspect of God's character is beautifully described in 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 through 8, which states, "Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking or easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails." God is the embodiment of love. As his image bearers, we too possess the same attribute, although, unlike our Savior, Jesus Christ, our love tends to be conditional. The most profound demonstration of God's love for us is revealed in John 3:16. "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life." This verse encapsulates the heart of our faith. God doesn't impose himself on us. We always have a choice. We respond to his love because of the agape love demonstrated by Jesus on the cross. This is the love that transforms lives, that offers hope and eternal life. The unconditional love offered by God through his apostle is found in 1 John 4, verses 15 through 17. "Whoever confesses that Jesus is the Son of God, God abides in him and he in God. We have come to know and have believed the love which God has for us. God is love, and the one who abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. By this, love is perfected with us, so that we may have confidence in the day of judgment. Because as he is, so also are we in this world." If you haven't done so already, let's not wait another day to accept this wonderful invitation to abide with God. This type of abiding is that which was originally given to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden before they sinned. God is love, and I love because he first loved me. This is Cherise Collins with an encouraging message from Carry the Light Ministries. Thank you.
Welcome back. We will now return to Ruth, a Virtuous Woman. Serendipity. Ruth rose early the next morning and asked the reapers if this was the field of her husband's kinsman, Boaz. When they nodded yes, she asked where she could begin to glean the barley for widows and sojourners. They pointed out the spot where she could begin gathering behind the reapers. The text continues. She happened to come to the part of a field belonging to Boaz, who was of the clan of Elimelech. The young widow, newly arrived in Bethlehem, unknowingly drew a great deal of attention from the people around her. They treated her with the courtesy afforded any sojourner, but were wary because she was from Moab and the widow of Naomi's eldest son, Mahlon. While they watched her with hospitable suspicion, Boaz, the owner of the field, rode up on his horse and greeted his reapers with blessings. "The Lord be with you." And they answered, "The Lord bless you." Glancing around at the gatherers behind his men, Boaz noticed an attractive young woman busily gathering stalks of barley behind his reapers and asked his men about her. She is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers." So she came, and she has continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest, the men explained. Boaz had already learned about Naomi's return to Bethlehem and that she had lost her husband and sons in Moab. Widowed and destitute, she returned to Bethlehem with her daughter-in-law, who was also widowed. But it was this woman's character that stood out most to Boaz. It was because of her treatment of Naomi and her willingness to remain with her through hardship. She would have chosen to forsake the gods of her people and turn her heart to the God of their fathers for Naomi to bring her to Bethlehem. Knowing that it would be responsible to introduce himself as her husband's kinsman, Boaz approached Ruth and welcomed her. He offered her his protection and blessings. He cautioned Ruth gently. "Now listen, my daughter. Do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping, and go after them. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn." Amazed by his kindness shown to a foreigner, especially one from Moab, Ruth fell face down to the ground in a posture of thankfulness and asked him why she, of all people, should garner such favor. Not only did Boaz respond so favorably, but prayed blessings over Ruth. "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land and come to a people that you did not know before. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." "Who is this man, Boaz?" she thought, pleased by his hospitality and welcome. "He treats me with such kindness and has given me more favor than his servants. This must be why Naomi told me to specifically look for his field to glean." When it was meal break, Boaz approached Ruth once again and invited her to come sit with the reapers and himself. She followed him to the table, and Boaz served her plenty of roasted grain to eat. She ate her fill and had plenty left over to bring to Naomi. When she left to return to her work in the field, Boaz instructed his men to leave extra stalks for her to gather behind them and not rebuke her for taking them. Ruth brought home a full ephah of barley, which she'd pounded out from that day's gathering, plus the extra roasted barley grains that were left over from the afternoon meal. She saved these for Naomi to eat. And when Naomi saw what Ruth brought home from gleaning, she asked excitedly, "Where did you glean today? And where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." When Ruth told her whose field she gleaned from, Naomi exclaimed with delight, "May he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." And then she explained to Ruth, "The man is a close relative of ours, one of our redeemers." Ruth also mentioned that he cautioned her to remain close to his men for protection while she continued to glean during the barley and wheat harvests. The fortuitous meeting between Ruth and Boaz brought a glimmer of hope to Naomi as she considered their kinsman redeemer and God's providence. A risky venture. It was time to bring the harvested barley to the threshing floor, and everyone was getting ready for the feast and celebration. The first fruits wave offering was given for God's bountiful provision, and now the people were ready to feast. Naomi and Ruth had been guests of another of her husband's relations for Passover, and they saw that Boaz was in attendance. She observed the polite deference Boaz showed towards Ruth during the Passover dinner. They appeared to enjoy each other's company. She began to formulate a plan in her head, but for it to work, her instincts would need to be absolutely correct, or someone would feel manipulated or possibly disrespected. Naomi prayed silently for the wisdom to speak about something that, if not handled properly, could bring shame to her daughter-in-law, but she knew the moment for boldness had come. What plan was Naomi formulating in her head that called for boldness? As always, she was looking out for Ruth's welfare and, in light of their present circumstances, began considering the possibility of the levirate marriage law. An example of the use of this law is found in the Book of Genesis, positioned in the middle of the story of Joseph. The patriarch Jacob's son Judah encouraged his second son Onan to enact the marriage law. After his eldest son died, he told Onan to marry Tamar, Er's widow, and bring forth a son to inherit. The reason was that died before a son was born of this union with Tamar. He died without a son, thereby permitting Onan to marry Tamar and fulfilling the duty of a brother-in-law. When considering Ruth's predicament, the duty falls to the closest kinsman of Elimelech to redeem the widow, and their firstborn son would be Mahlon's and inherit his name. Naomi saw the guarded yet respectful affinity Boaz showed Ruth whenever he saw her. She decided to speak to Ruth about it. Naomi told Ruth about the provisions of the levirate marriage law and its benefits. She explained that the law was meant to ensure that a family's name could be carried on by the birth of the first son born to the union. She also explained what was meant by a kinsman redeemer under God's law. This person, she told her, was a man who had the responsibility to act on behalf of a relative who was in trouble, danger, or in need. Looking carefully at Ruth's face, Naomi inquired about Ruth's opinion of Boaz as her potential kinsman redeemer. Was there interest in the man? Or am I just imagining it because it's what I want? She questioned herself. The sudden blush appearing on her face and neck answered Naomi's question with certainty. And God be praised, Ruth appeared agreeable to the possibility. The problem was that she didn't know whether Boaz would be willing to marry Ruth, a Moabitess, since this was the condition under the law. Nevertheless, trusting God's providence, Naomi told Ruth exactly what she was to do that evening after the feast, once all the revelers left the threshing floor. She told the younger woman, "Wash therefore and anoint yourself, and put on your cloak and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." Ruth did all that Naomi instructed her, even carefully following Boaz to where he was to sleep for the night amongst the heaps of barley. After the revelers left, and the men sought their pallets, and the sounds of slumber arose, Ruth quietly approached a sleeping Boaz, uncovered his feet, and lay down. The text explains what happened next. At midnight, the man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. He said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." And he said, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask, for all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. And now it is true that I am a redeemer, yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good. Let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then, as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning." Although the text does not specify it, the reader can see that Boaz, a man older than her, yet smitten with the young widow, was shocked that she chose him to redeem her. Boaz, whose name means swiftness, began to plan what he must do to fulfill his promise to Ruth. They arose early the next morning so as not to disturb the others around them. Boaz, wanting to preserve Ruth's honor, encouraged her not to speak of being at the threshing floor with him all night, and to assure her of his commitment to act as her kinsman redeemer. Boaz sent her home with a large portion of grain for Naomi to see. He told her, "Bring the garment you are wearing and hold it out." So she held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, "How did you fare, my daughter?" Then she told her all the man had done for her, saying, "These 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said to me, 'You must not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law.'" Hearing his words, and seeing that this gesture was a promise from Boaz that the matter would be settled that very day, Naomi encouraged Ruth to rest assured that their kinsman redeemer, Boaz, would uphold their family's honor. Redemption and blessings. Boaz proved to be all that Naomi presumed. He was clearly a godly and compassionate man, but he was also a man of business. The levirate marriage law was uppermost in his mind as he made his way that morning to the city gate to conduct his business transaction in the presence of witnesses. Dear listener, you might be wondering, what does conducting a business matter have to do with arriving at the city gate? Well, in the ancient Near East, men, particularly the elders and leaders, gathered at the city gate because it served as the center of public life, the town hall, the courthouse, a place for social gatherings, and the marketplace. This central hub was a fortified area with benches for the elders and leaders to sit and gather to conduct crucial legal, commercial, and administrative business. The city gate was where Boaz went to transact his business that day. And once again, listener, we see the invisible hand of God at work behind the scenes in yet another coincidence. It just so happens that the very relative with the actual legal authority to redeem the property was near the city gate when Boaz arrived. The story continues. Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down. And behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, "Turn aside, friend, sit down here." And he sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, "Sit down here." So they sat down. Then he said to the Redeemer, "Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you." And he said, "I will redeem it." Then Boaz said, "The day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth, the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance." Then the Redeemer said, "I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it." The unnamed relative who hosted the Passover dinner Naomi and Ruth attended initially wanted the land, but soberly changed his mind when he heard about the levirate marriage requirement that came with it. He explained how this transaction would impair the inheritance of his own family, and he forfeited his right over to Boaz as the next kinsman. He removed the sandal from his foot and handed it to Boaz in the presence of witnesses. The text explains. This was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, the one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other. And this was the manner of attesting in Israel. When the Redeemer said to Boaz, "Buy it for yourself," he drew off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, "You are witnesses this day that I have brought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech, and all that belonged to Chilion and to Malon. Also Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Malon, I have brought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are witnesses this day. Then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, We are witnesses. Redemption was the transaction Boaz conducted that day at the city gate, a promise he'd made to Ruth before she left his presence in the early hours of the morning. The only obstacle for him was that he was not the nearest relative. Therefore, he needed this man's forfeiture of his claim to redeem the land and marry the widow Ruth. God intervened and blessed the day. The curious onlookers who bore witness to this full gathering of elders at the city gate exclaimed blessings to Boaz and to his intended wife, Ruth. Their kind acceptance of a foreigner from a pagan land to be joined with a man of Israel was evident in their words. May you act worthily in Ephrathah, and be renowned in Bethlehem, and may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman. A Virtuous Woman. The fourth chapter of the story concludes with the marriage of Boaz and Ruth through the Levirate law, culminating in the birth of their firstborn, Obed, who became Malon's legal son, thereby securing his inheritance in Israel. For Naomi, this was a restoration of her name and her standing within the community. Recall that she renamed herself Mara to describe the bitter life brought about by sinful disobedience to God. But because of her kinsman redeemer, Boaz, she could once again walk in the true meaning of her nature and name. The women said to Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. The writer inserts an interesting honor bestowed on the family by the women of Bethlehem. To honor Naomi's joy for the restoration of her family through the Levirate marriage law, the women named her grandson Obed as a token of their acceptance of her back into their community. The final paragraph in the Book of Ruth is meant to help the reader recognize the established Levitical proofs of family lineage for legal and religious standing. The writers of the ancient biblical text used genealogies to bridge large gaps in time to show God's plan as spoken through the prophetic word over the centuries. For instance, Samuel provides a brief genealogy of the ancestral lineage of Israel's second king. Now these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Aminadab. Aminadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered David. The apostle and gospel writer Matthew, whose scriptural message was written for the Jews in Jerusalem, as well as those dispersed throughout the Roman Empire, opened his gospel with the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. In this gospel, there is something unusual. Matthew was inspired to write it for the benefit of anyone reading it, especially a Jew. Matthew identified 4 women by name in the genealogy of Jesus Christ, and 3 of the 4 are from pagan nations: Tamar, Rahab, and Ruth. The last woman, Mary, the mother of Jesus, was a peasant girl from Nazareth and was also named in the genealogy. It is important that we understand that each of these pagan women came to know God by reputation, through his character, and by their choice to follow him. God accepted them despite their ethnicity, reputation, and background. Their conversions were so significant in biblical history that their names appeared in the genealogy of Matthew's Gospel. God's plan of redemption was revealed for all to see in the lineage of the one who was sent to this world to redeem and restore sinful man. Psalm 68, verses 4 and 5, is a praise to the God of redemption. Sing to God, sing praises to his name. Lift up a song to him who rides through the deserts. His name is the Lord. Exult before him. Father of the fatherless and protector of widows is God in his holy habitation. This biblical narrative is for those who have chosen to trust and wait on the Lord for their blessing to come to fruition. Waiting entails perseverance and trust, even when it seems as if God is ignoring your constant prayers. Here's an encouraging suggestion. Don't stop praying. The scriptures remind you to rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. If you have decided, as Ruth declared to Naomi, that your God will be my God, and have chosen to trust him as your Lord, you will have a peace that surpasses all understanding. If you ask him and believe, he will give you the desires of your heart. He redeemed Naomi and Ruth when they were met with desperate circumstances, and he will certainly do it for you. I hope you enjoyed listening to this presentation of Heroes of the Old Testament, brought to you by In the Lighthouse, your safe harbor from the storm. I was pleased to present this short story of a truly remarkable biblical character, Ruth, a virtuous woman. Ruth's story is our story. At one time or another in the life of the Christian, we find ourselves in unfamiliar and foreign places. The people don't look like us, or they speak another language we don't understand. How do we fit in? Should we change the way we are and be more like them? Or try to be our authentic selves and be kind and welcoming to them instead? What if you're rejected? Will you still be willing to love them, or will you walk away? To be virtuous is to have something inside of you that is abundant and exemplified in your moral behavior towards others. It is something you actively pursue despite the opinions of others. You are uniquely led by the Spirit towards a single goal: righteousness. Your focus is always pointed heavenward. Your hope is in eternity with Jesus. If you want to continue hearing more about the heroes of the Old Testament, please let us know in the comment section below this video. Transcripts for this and all future episodes can be found in our show notes on the blog page of our website. And speaking of our website, we'd like you to visit us at the Lighthouse at www.carrythelightministries.com and look for our tab on the homepage. We invite you to subscribe to this channel, share our videos with your friends, and like us on social media. I'm your Lighthouse Keeper, Daphne Collins with Carry the Light Ministries. Until next time, be blessed.